happy that you have joined me once again. Today we are going to do a project that I think everyone can make personal, and that is do a portrait of an animal you love. And I have a reference, and I'm going to take you through the steps. It's a lot easier than you think it would be, and I'm excited to share some of my tips with you today because it's one of my favorite things to do. I do portraits actually on commission, and why I eyeball the transfer of the image. This is a way to get your proportions correct. So let's get ready to do a portrait. Okay, so welcome back. We are ready now to take our cartoon that we did as a transfer and turn our portrait into a painted portrait of this animal. Just to recap, we had a printed image of the animal. We gridded it at 1-inch squares, and to double its size, we created the same grid on a canvas, which I indicated by this blue tape. And then we drew in each content of each square on its corresponding square on the canvas, basically doubling the size. And we got this great proportion for this cat portrait. So I'm going to remove the tape now because I am confident that I got what I needed from my transfer. And hopefully you're feeling the same way if you did the first one of this two-part series on painting an animal portrait. Get rid of that tape. And we can get to the acrylic paint portion. I pulled out some paintbrushes that I like to use for something like this that give me enough variety to do little details and bigger areas. These are brushes that I think will come in handy. This is like a 1-inch rounded edge, maybe it's 3/4 inch. This is like a 1/2 inch blunt flat. This is maybe a 1/4 inch of an angled brush, and about the same with shorter bristles. And then I have a little detail brush that'll be for things like whiskers and little details. I go to this angled brush all the time. It is like a 1/2 inch angled, and it's great for dropping a lot of paint or coming on the edge and dragging with the longer side away from me, dragging away, and you can get a nice clean line. That's one of my favorites. And another rounded, just a variety of brushes that you're comfortable with and will express your brush strokes the way you want to express them. There's going to be a lot in here that I do because I've been doing it for years, and you're going to be learning. So I'm going to try and keep it as simple as possible, but you'll see me take it in directions that you may or may not be comfortable with following. If you can just block out color, you're going to get really far. And then don't forget to print an additional reference that's nice and clean that you can look at. And once you get going with it, there comes a time when you put down your reference and then you let the painting tell its own story. And it may not be the same story that the photo told, but it's your story and it's your interpretation of how you love this animal, or how you are interested in meeting this type of animal, or whatever it is that you want to say and do. There will come a time when you put the reference down and you let the painting speak for itself through your brush. Now in the case of this, shouldn't even set it down. In the case of this particular animal that I'm doing, this is my cat, Longcat. He actually passed away recently and I wanted to memorialize him. So I took a photo of him maybe a year ago, and I'm using that as my reference. And he was an orange tabby. This photo, the color's not completely correct. For the sake of this, I'm just going to kind of go off this a little bit and punch it up in my mind. But you may want to take a look at your computer screen or your phone for your color reference, because I found, like with my printer, some of the ink must be low because he's not as vibrant as he was in life. So I'm going to key him up a bit. But what I want to do is start finding the form and the shadows. So let's start with the shadows and get those kind of laid out, and then we'll start coming into the middle tone of his fur, and then we'll come into highlights, and then we'll come into deep shadow and other proportions. So just let's start blocking him in. I think that would be good. So this I'm going to use as a reference, and I think I'm going to tape it up where I can see it, but where I can't get paint on it, because I really like this picture. So that's for me. Don't worry about that. I can just look at that and match my color. So for the shadow area, I'm going to find my palette for the cat. And in the case of this cat, I'm using a raw sienna, a raw umber, yellow ochre. I'm gonna have a little bit of phthalo blue. That'll be when I'm mixing maybe some of the background colors, maybe a little bit into the blacks of his eyes. Gotta have white. And then this is a color my friend Pat told me about, which I am now in love with, and it is a Van Dyke Red. He might use Van Dyke Brown, but this Van Dyke Red is wonderful because I can mix everything I need basically from these for this particular portrait. So I'll get started, as I said, with mixing up a good shadow color. And because the cat is orange, if you want to darken a color, you find its complement. And on the color wheel, you have the primary colors, red, yellow, blue. And then you have the secondary colors, which are the mixtures of all those colors. So the mix of red and yellow is orange, the mix of red and blue is purple, and the mix of blue and yellow is green. And opposing on that wheel, I won't get into it now, are their complements. And if you add a complement to a color, it darkens the color if you just add a little bit. And I'll show you how that works. Okay, so if I put an orange or orangish color like that, and opposing it on the wheel is blue, so its complement is blue. Blue and orange are complementary colors. When they're side by side, they kind of vibrate because they're competing with each other. So I'm going to take a little bit of that phthalo blue I said I had, but not so much that it changes this orange to a blue color. But when I mix it, if you look, if I only use a little bit, it darkens it while still keeping the property of orange, which is really interesting. It'll start tipping towards gray, but it's really a cool thing when you're using complements to darken a color. So I highly recommend you take a little time, look at a color wheel, and learn the complementary colors. A lot of sports teams use complementary colors in their colors because they're so vibrant and they kind of catch your eye. So this I'm going to kind of call Wildcat's shadow color. And anywhere that I had in my reference this kind of shadowy effect, maybe I'll grab my other reference so you can see it. There's sort of a darker thing going on here under his chin. So I'm gonna lay in that color. In the case of my drawing, you can see it happening. That pastel is mixing with my paint. I'm not gonna let that worry me. And I'm not gonna worry it for you because you guys hopefully used a pencil in your cartoon. I used the pastels because I wanted you to be able to, the dark pastel, so that you could see it easier on the camera. So I'm not gonna take this too, I'm not gonna worry about it too much. It's totally mixing with this, but that's okay. That can be part of my story as I get there. It'll just help me establish really what's going on with shadow for him. So once this acrylic dries, I'll be able to layer over it the way that I want. It's just that while we're in this stage, that pastel gets really strong when it gets wet, and that's what you guys are seeing, is that strength of the pastels. But it's still good to kind of find the shadow of your animal, because it's going to help you. And in the case of this, it cut off, I'm going to probably make up what happens over here. So just decide how you want your animal to end. Because I didn't have anything particular going on, I'm just gonna kind of indicate his tail goes off the canvas. I'm okay with that. So under his chin was a drop of shadow. Fortunately, I could still see his whiskers. Under his lips was a drop of shadow. See how he's kind of coming together though already. You can really see the big picture of my cat in this. There's a deep shadow over here. And this shadow carried here. There's a little bit here. A little bit here. So you're going to continue just as I am and find the deepest, darkest parts of your reference and just get those indicated now. It'll just help you commit to what's going on. I know that this stripe in his face is not black as it looks now, but it kind of reinforces my cartoon under there, so I'll be able to find what I need to find when I go with the other color palette. And this is just going to help me. And you may want to see I'm doing detail lines with a big brush. If you want to do the same thing, I recommend a smaller brush. I just tend to gunslinger it at times just to get big areas of color, but that can get a little out of hand if you're not confident with the tools that you're using. So just, I caution you to use the brush to your comfort level and its best ability. I tend to work big to small, so I like to get big areas laid out first. And then I'm going to come back with detail as the drawing gets closer to what my goal is. And so you can see, I'm just trying to make sure I keep the contrast consistent with my reference so that I don't lose the shadowing that I've created. I don't want to lose that, or I'm going to lose the form of the animal. And again, this is kind of a mess because it's mixing in with my pastels, but you can see he's starting to take not only shape, but well, I guess he's taking shape and his form is becoming more apparent with the color. That's kind of what I like about what's happening with this. And it's also, for me, I love brush strokes. You may not like brush strokes, in which case go to smaller brushes and use more blender brushes. I don't have blender brushes in this tutorial, but there are some that are really good for when you get to the nitty-gritty and the detail. If you want to blend a dark color with a light color, and you take one of these little fan brushes and you can kind of do this, and then you can fade it together. That's kind of a nice trick. But that's, again, that's way down the road. I just like to, if I think of something, I like to share it while I'm thinking of it, because just the act of doing this live for you helps remind me what it's like to learn about doing this sort of thing. It helps me empathize with what you might be going through when you see what I'm working on and it doesn't translate. I'm trying to solve the same problems you are. I just have a little, most likely, more experience of kind of doing it on the fly, maybe, than you. And so you're gonna see me change things up rapidly while I figure out how I want my image to look ultimately. And again, I'm still with a big brush, but don't feel like you need to do that. I think I'll switch just for the sake of doing some of the face detail, because he's got much more delicate features than that brush is going to help me with. I'm going to also bring in a slightly lighter color so that I don't lose the highlights of the nose with all the paint I'm adding. And the eyes. If you don't change brushes a lot, the paint's gonna get real muddy, as you can see. And in this case particularly, it's super muddy because I'm hitting that pastel. But we'll soldier on, see what comes of it. The pastel is so strong. So again, hopefully you guys used pencil, so you're not fighting it like I am, because it's definitely going to be a little bit of a challenge here. But I just want to get the indication of how to find the form with your color and whatever palette you're wanting to use. It's totally up to you. Okay, so this process can take quite a while, so I've jumped ahead a little bit for you. You can see I'm still laying it out. I started to do Wong Cat's eyes, and I want to just go back and show you what I did and why, because I haven't gotten to his mouth yet. So my cat had like really beautiful green, yellowy eyes. And in this reference, you can see they're deep in shadow from his brow. The light was coming from above, and you really only see the color itself on the bottom. So I'm just going to indicate that just as I see it in the reference, because that'll really make them pop when I go to add the highlights and all that. So I've mixed up with a little bit of phthalo blue and a little bit of yellow ochre and white, lots of white, this kind of bouncy color, so that it shines. And then I'm gonna just mix in a little bit more of the phthalo and maybe a little bit of the raw umber to do the upper color, which is in shadow, so that he feels, I feel like they're orbs. So there you go, it's that easy. And cat's eyes aren't, their pupils aren't like our pupils. Their pupils are not circles. They're ellipses with a point at the top and the bottom, or almost like what do you call marquee? So that when they expand out, they can get really round, but when the light is bright, I'm sure if you have a cat or been around a cat, you know that their eyes go slits, kind of like a snake. It's pretty awesome. So he was in enough light to show the color of his eyes, but it was deep enough that his pupils were pretty wide. So you can see that in this reference right here. And I'm gonna do that and maybe add a little bit of white just for the sake of you seeing how quickly that can bring life to the eyes. It's cool, right? All right, next thing I think I'm gonna do is the nose, because he had pink nose, but he had a lot of freckles on it. So I'm gonna get that going so you can see what my cat looked like. It's a little bit redder than I want, but that's okay. Bring in highlights. And the anatomy of a cat's nose is funky. So if you're doing a cat, I would recommend you have multiple references so you can see the details. I'm okay with what I have here, but I've also stared at the cat's nose for hours. So whatever animal you're doing, just be sure you have some close-ups for the details so that you can get everything that you'd like. The other thing, I'm not wearing my glasses at the moment, so I am kind of painting by braille a little bit. But I just wanted to be able to get this to a stage where we can talk about it. That's one of his freckles. And get him underway. So, again with cats, they have this little split in their nose. I was saying earlier to a friend of mine that when I used to paint on Extreme Makeover Home Edition, I would paint with tons of volunteers. I met the most incredible people on the road with that show, and one of the things that we would always do is try and work very hard to keep each other awake while we painted. So I got really used to painting and talking at the same time. So I do pause a bit because my brain is trying to register what I just did at the same time that I'm trying to explain it to you. So you'll hear hesitation, but I got really good at carrying on conversations and keeping track of conversations while painting on the fly in 58 of our beautiful United States with people of all backgrounds and of all ability, and it was one of the highlights of my working career, working on that show and meeting the incredible people of our United States, because it's seriously amazing. I'm so fortunate to have had that opportunity. If ever you get a chance to volunteer and help others in a similar fashion, I cannot stress it enough that you will come home exhausted, and you will come home spent, but you will come home with a full heart when you give creativity to others from yourself and share it with others. I can't talk about that enough. It was probably my favorite job of all time. And coming home to my family was exactly what I needed to do. I had a bunch of kids and husband and pets. So now I just work on jobs that are a little closer to home. They travel, it's not year round, but I don't think I'll ever find anything as fulfilling as Extreme Makeover Home Edition was, as far as sharing my creativity and connecting with other human beings on something like that. So, volunteer. That's my pitch for volunteering. You will never regret it. Although, okay, to be fair, I volunteered for the first 3 episodes and then I got paid, so heads up on that. But I still volunteer to this day, and for the aquarium, and I volunteered for Habitat for Humanity. Giving of yourself when it's not about a paycheck can be so freeing, because you know what you're doing is all about helping others, and in the end you do help yourself, I feel. So that's my pitch for that. All right, so Longcat's coming along. It's really funny. He's kind of looking like the Lorax here a little bit. That's okay. I'll find him amidst all these brush strokes. If you got to this stage with yours, you're finding that you're starting to see the animal shine through. At any point in the process, you can abandon the reference and start taking a look at your art as the expression of the animal you're portraying, and not look at this anymore. For me, this is kind of a memorial piece, so I'm probably going to work it a lot more, because I want to have this with all of his beauty and his features. But if you've gotten through the cartoon stage and you're happy with where you are, hey, it's okay to stop and say, this is great, I'm happy. I'll start another one, but I'll stop at this stage and kind of really digest what it was I learned with this one. Please do it. Don't feel like there is a set finish. That set finish is your decision and your creative control, not mine. So take this as far as you want, stop it when you need to stop it. Most likely, because I'm probably gonna have a few more hours on him than I want to actually live film. So I will for sure post his final look, but I'll stop filming now. We'll call this a lesson, and I want you to feel free to do your pet or your animal in the way that you want to do it. The background that's just incidental. You can leave it. There's something really kind of cool about an unfinished painting. If you've seen the one of Washington, I can't remember who the artist was. I should know it, but you see Washington, and then there's kind of this unfinished exposed canvas at the base where he wasn't finished. There's something really cool about that. So I'm going to stop on Wonkat for you guys right now. It's a work in progress, and you don't need to necessarily travel along with me. I want you to dive into yours, and we'll do more lessons that are more concise with a finite end to them. But this is just to get you launched. So good luck with your pet portraits. Come back and check out what I have in the future, and I'm glad you joined me today.